listening to Your Secret is Safe with Me, non-judgmental talk about infidelity with Dr. Marie Murphy. If you're looking for new perspectives on complicated relationship issues, you've come to the right place.
Days go by, they're crawling by.
Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Marie Murphy. This podcast is all about expanding the conversation around infidelity. I'm a relationship coach, and I specialize in helping people who are having affairs make decisions about how to move forward that are truly right for them. On this show, we feature tools and guidance from my coaching practice, as well as advice from other professionals whose work pertains to the sometimes complicated business of romantic relationships. Today, I have the pleasure of talking with Courtney Moore, an acupuncturist and medical intuitive based out of San Francisco. Courtney has been using the tarot for nearly a decade in her personal spiritual development and enjoys sharing its wisdom with her patients and clients. Courtney sees the tarot as a tool for understanding life's challenges and opportunities with courage and equanimity, and a means of putting our individual experiences into a more cosmic perspective. In Courtney's opinion, the tarot is best understood as a means of accessing your own sacred guidance system rather than a method of predicting the future. To learn more about Courtney and her work, visit CourtneyMooreACU.com. CourtneyMooreACU.com. And that's Courtney with an E and Moore with an E at the end. And you can check out the spelling in the show notes, of course. Before we get to our conversation, this episode is brought to you by Marie Murphy, PhD Relationship Coaching. That's me. I provide shame-free, blame-free, non-judgmental relationship coaching. You can talk to me about the things that seem too messy or weird or stigmatized to share with your best friend or your spouse or even your therapist, including but not limited to matters related to infidelity. To learn more about me and my work, please go to mariemurphyphd.com. Hi, Courtney. It's awesome to have you here.
Hi, Marie. I'm really excited to talk to you today. This is going to be really fun.
Yay. Awesome. Okay. So let's talk about why we're talking about the tarot. Can you explain to our listeners what the tarot is and how it makes sense, how it helps us make sense of the breadth of human experiences?
Yeah. So, I was introduced to the tarot from a friend right when I got out of graduate school, and I was such a mess, and she offered me a reading, and I didn't know what these crazy cards were. And it was really fun. It was a really generative experience. It really helped me sort of have a little momentum when I felt so stuck, have a little bit of clarity about what my experience was and how I might change that experience to something that I really wanted to experience instead of feeling stuck and trapped. And in that session, she gifted me a deck, and I just started playing with it. And as I learned more, I learned it's a beautiful practice. It's a pretty ancient practice, and it really taps into some archetypal themes that we experience as humans. It really helps us see, there's the major arcana describe the fool's journey, which is this beautiful concept that we all start as fools. And I love this idea of only a fool would choose to incarnate in this world. And I think we've all felt that. Why are we here? Why did we take this step? Like, we thought this would be easier. I remember Gabor Mate once, I saw him speak, and he said, I want my headstone to read, I thought it would be easier. And it's not. And, people turn to these practices, tarot, astrology, intuitives, when we need guidance and we need information. And tarot is a really beautiful way to get that in this sort of metaphorical form. We get these messages, and we get to choose how we apply these messages to our unique experience, but we also get to recognize there's like a broader arc of human experience that we all go through. And I think it's really like kind of normalizing and unifying in that way also, to sort of see that we all have these challenges, and there's a way through these challenges, and there's a way to I think the tarot also is beautiful because it sort of forces you to be honest about the challenges you're facing. The tarot, I have many different decks, and some of them are notorious for just calling people out. The cards don't mess around sometimes, and they'll say, you got to deal with this. And I think that's one of the things the tarot is. It's a way to really sort of like be honest with yourself about what you're going through and honest about what you want moving forward.
Oh, I love that. And I'd never heard that Gabor Mate quote. I don't know if that's in print anywhere, but I love that because I think that sums up like so much of what I hear from people, whether they've come to me about a relationship situation or about like, work or anything in life. And I've certainly been, I maybe guilty is the wrong word, but I've certainly thought the same thing too. Like, why isn't this easier? Like, why isn't this just Like, why is this so inconvenient? And I think a lot of what I see people dealing with that I work with is, like the situation has come up, whether it's having an affair or something else, and it's this inconvenient problem.
Mhm.
And they just kind of want it to go away sometimes
Mhm.
without having to be uncomfortable and go through it and be comprehensively honest with themselves, because often it seems too scary to do that because it could lead to very major changes in their external lives, which takes time and energy and involves other people and that kind of thing.
Mhm.
So I love what you just said. Why don't you walk us through what the Fool's journey looks like and what kind of like elements or I guess moments in the universal human experience are expressed in the major arcana?
Yeah, I'll pick some of my favorites because there's definitely some sort of like major milestones on that 2022 card journey that I find really compelling. So you start with the Fool. It's the 0 card. We're not even at 1. And in most deck, it's a picture of a guy walking off a cliff and looking so cheery about it. He is starting on his journey and he has no idea what he's in for.
Yeah.
And we return to the Fool many times during our life. And there's so many different adventures and experiences we have where you have to start as the Fool in a new relationship, in a new career, in a new city. There's so many times we have to embody this beginner's mind energy. Shortly after the Fool, right after the Fool, you get to the Magician, which is a beautiful card because it really shows, as above, so below, as within, so without. It shows how much of this bizarre human experience we have is a reflection of our inner world. And the more we can take seniority of that inner world, the more we can have the outer world we want. And I love that this card shows up early in the journey because I think that's a theme you get to play with the whole time. How is my experience a reflection of my own beliefs, my own fears, my own desires? And desire has many layers. When you were talking, I was thinking about how, someone's stuck in maybe a relationship that's not making them totally happy. There's a desire to stay in the relationship for comfort. There's a desire for expansion and excitement. There's
Right.
an desire to figure out what it is to be true to themselves. And
Right.
sometimes all those desires are at odds. And
Yeah,
so the
exactly.
Magician, it really asks you to like get true with yourself about your desires, because
Yeah.
that's a lot of what's driving you.
Right.
So we'll go down the way a little more. I don't want to skip right to the Tower, but of course that's what everyone thinks of.
Why not?
Yeah, there's some fun thing that you learn in a abstract sense, you learn in a more institutionalized sense, and somewhere along the line, things fall apart. And that is such a universal human experience. And it's so interesting to me that so many people think of the Tower as a negative card. It's like the bad card in the deck. The Tower and the Death card, which show up later, are two of my favorite cards because to me, those cards are all about creation and potential. And there are so many times when we can't really create the reality we want without raising down the reality that we have. And honestly, like early on in COVID, I did a spread and shockingly, the Tower showed up. And that is so this experience we're in right now for me.
Right.
Like we have such an opportunity because we've raised down a lot of these institutions and habits and norms that we have. And that's what the Tower is.
Yeah.
So I think the Tower is beautiful, but the Tower often shows up when people are like, no, like
Yeah.
I don't want to raise
with
it.
this.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. But it's a gift. I really believe that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to interject something here because so often when I'm talking to people about, that being in sort of a moment that the Tower card represents, like a moment of like, their life is kind of falling apart essentially, or is potentially about to, they always say things like, well, it's easy for you to say, like, you're on the other side of this or whatever. And, that's always true. Like when you're in it, you're in it. And knowing that this is a universal thing or that you will get through it eventually, that doesn't necessarily lessen the discomfort of being in that moment. But that isn't necessarily a problem.
Mm-hmm.
Part of what, to me, part of what this card symbolizes is the fact that, like, yes, we all have to go through these, these destabilizing experiences at times. And the discomfort that comes with doing that is just as normal as the destabilization itself. And it's not necessarily problematic.
That's right.
in
That's
and of
right.
itself.
And, I really think destruction is necessary for creation.
Yeah.
And when you think about it that way, again, the tower is such a gift, even when it's a poorly timed gift.
Right.
Creation is such a big
Right.
part of the human experience. And so
Right.
any opportunity to create more, I think, is welcomed on some level.
Right.
Right after the tower, you have the star, which has to do with healing after that destructive period. And I think that's a really beautiful and important moment to respect also the need to sort of like rest, let yourself be cared for, let yourself put the pieces back together before you start back on that hero's journey where there's, again, so many bumps and turns in the road. Like I mentioned, the death card is another one of my favorites. It's a little farther down the road. And part of why I love it is the death card really signifies rebirth. And again, it's this idea of closing a door so that you can open a new one.
Right.
And I think people see it. And again, there's this resistance to endings, resistance to change, resistance to like letting something come to a close. And I just think I see in my practice, people hold on to things, and that's the thing that causes illness.
Yeah.
When you're unwilling to let go of those things, when you're unwilling to close that chapter and write a new one, that's when your body gets mad at you, right? And the death card is a really beautiful acknowledgement of like, let it close so that you can start something new. And then, farther down, we end up with the world card, which is sort of like, you did it. Congratulations. Celebrate. You learned the lesson. You achieved the thing. And part of why I love the world card is it's a real cause to celebrate. It's a cause to say, hey, this journey is difficult. This journey is full of a lot of inconveniences. And sometimes you're in a moment where the sun is out and shining. And by all means, take a moment to celebrate that and bask in it. And there's the sun right before the world. And they both give you that opportunity to say, they kind of look back and like, wow, I really came a long way. Who am I now? How do I want to celebrate who I am now? And guess what? We're going to go right back to zero soon. We're going to be the fool again before long.
Right.
And again, there's a lot of twists and turns on that major arcana journey. I really encourage anyone who's listening just to check out some simple web resources and read about that journey. It's very beautiful when you look at it all mapped out.
Or do you recommend any particular web resources? I know there's a lot out there. Some of it's better than others.
There are so many. I actually really love, it's a very simple site, learntarot.com. I really like how they talk about the cards, and I really like how it's outlined. There's also Biddy Tarot. She's a much bigger affair. She teaches and she has her own deck. And I think she does a really lovely job also kind of making it accessible for beginners.
And is that BIDDY?
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
BIDDYTAROT.
Yep.
Cool. How do you, when you get people coming to you with questions about their relationships with other people, and let's focus on romantic relationships for this conversation, how do you use the tarot to help them get perspective on their relationship questions and challenges?
That's such a great question. In my experience, the key to using the tarot productively is in asking a good question. And I could even extrapolate in life. One of the keys to like our growth and our relationships is asking good questions. And many people, especially newbies who come to me for a reading, they're just kind of curious about this weird thing I do. They don't know how to ask a good question, which is totally fair.
Yeah, no, this is so interesting. Tell me an example of a not so good question.
Well, anything for me, and there are different readers who read different ways. I don't read the future. I feel really strongly that we are creating our future every moment, and there are so many variables that are changing all the time. That said, I've had divinatory experiences about the future that are really powerful, but I don't feel comfortable or gifted in that sense. And so when someone comes to me and says, will I move in 6 months? Or, will I meet my husband in the next year?
Right.
I don't know. I have no idea. And I'm not gonna ask the cards to tell us that when there's so many other things on the table.
Right.
I also, what I find is my decks can be real sassy, and they like to tell you what you already know. So if you ask a question that's so open-ended, like, should I leave my job? Well, you already know you hate your job. You're here because you're ready for something new. The cards are going to tell you, yeah, leave your job. And now you've spent, some time and money exploring something that you already knew the answer to.
And that can be useful. I mean,
it can be.
Not that there's anything wrong with that.
Yeah, it can be. Although I think if you're willing to do the work to sort of, again, like be as honest with yourself as you can be upfront. If you know you want to leave the job, don't ask me if you should leave the job. Ask, what is the right career fit for me? What sort of career path would be more full of growth and expansion for me?
Okay.
I think, again, I tend not to like yes or no questions. I think something more open-ended helps you sort of interpret your experience in ways that are just a little bit richer. There's more you can do with it when you let it be a little bit more abstract.
Yeah.
If it's a yes or no, I think sometimes the cards, again, they get kind of cheeky because sometimes that answer depends. Sometimes that's still being decided, the yes or no. But what you can get from a reading is information so that you can go make that decision from a more grounded place.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Let's come back to the matter of universal human experiences and how those tend to show up in romantic relationships. What can the tarot tell us about universal, I was going to say challenges and opportunities, but I guess what I mean is sort of like joys and sorrows in romantic relationships and how they're all sort of par for the course as humans?
That's interesting. I want to answer that, and I also want to amend my last answer really quickly.
Sure.
Which is to say, another not good question is asking about someone else's experience.
Oh, sure. Yes.
And I want to bring that home since we're specifically talking about relationships. I think it's so tempting to say, like, does he love me?
Yep.
Or, like, is he going to be around in 6 months?
Yep.
And sometimes, I know, I understand the drive to ask those questions. Those are the things we want to know at the end of the day. But someone else's experience, to be really blunt, is not our business.
Oh, yeah.
Their internal spiritual journey is their journey. And the only thing we can change to make it a little more pragmatic is ourselves, right? We can only use that information for our own growth. And so a good question about relationships is really focused on like, how is this serving me? How is this not serving me? How am I showing up in a way that works for me? How are my needs not being met? Turning it back to yourself over and over again so that you're the one who's ultimately taking the reins, taking control of your life.
Couldn't agree more. Yeah. We're always responsible for our own experiences. We are never in control of anybody else's experiences.
That's it. That's exactly it.
Yeah.
And as far as your second excellent question on sort of like in relationships, how can the tarot sort of speak to these universal experiences we have? I'm going to turn to the minor arcana for that, which we haven't talked about yet. So for your listeners, there are 4 suits in the tarot, in addition to that major arcana, hero's journey. And it's just like a deck of playing cards. That's actually how the tarot started. And so you have the suit of wands, which has to do with fire and adventure and passion. You have the suit of cups, which has to do with emotions, and often relationships can show up in cups. You have the suit of swords, which has to do with mental activity, thinking. There's swords are double-edged. That mind can really cut through the world in a way that's very helpful, and it can also be painful for ourselves. And then you have the suit of pentacles or discs, which has to do with, that's the earth suit, that has to do with practical matters, career, finance, all the day in, day out material parts of our life. So I think these cards can often, and so each of these suits is numbered 1 through 10, and the numbers have different meanings I'm not going to get into. And there's also 4 court cards for each suit that has different meanings. And I think these cards have a lot of meaning around sort of, again, the nuance of each one of those suits, those aspects of human experience. We all know what it's like to have passion. We all know what it's like to need money. We all know what it's like to like deal with the mind that is spinning. And I think in our relationships, that's kind of like the day in, day out meat of how we're relating to someone else. And I think the minor arcana can flesh that out in a way where you see these patterns that we are all living out every day, called out in a way you can say, oh, you're right. I am really spinning with my thoughts right now. And that's the thing that's keeping me from connecting or keeping me from making a choice. So you can say, man, I am just overwhelmed with grief right now. And that is something that people experience in loss and relationship and disappointment. And that grief is informing the way I can show up right now for myself, for my partner, or for whatever the situation is. So I think that I'm not going to get too lost in this. There's 78 cards and each one of them has a beautiful message. But I think each one of those messages helps us sort of look at, again, the way we're showing up and the way our experience is coloring the way we're looking at the relationship and the way we're, again, showing up for it as well.
I love that. I love that so much. Like reflecting back to ourselves, how we're participating and therefore how we are co-creating situations that we think are just happening to us or that we think our partner is doing to us.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really all there is to it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly right. And I will say, again, I don't like reading other people's experience and I don't like telling the future. And also there are specific cards that point out things like, he's not being honest right now, or she's being really controlling right now. And sometimes that is enough of a nod that it's sort of like validation, like, oh, that's why I'm so defensive. Like that control is really bothering me. And that is a conversation we need to have. And again, it comes back to you. Like that's a conversation we need to have, not they're a bad person and I am vindicated and being unhappy right now. Right.
Yep, exactly.
It always comes back to sort of like, well, what are you going to do about it?
Yep.
What do you want to do to make this an experience that is better for your own growth?
Yeah, absolutely. Your partner is a neutral circumstance.
Yeah.
No, really, until you give them meaning,
so
they're a neutral
good.
circumstance.
Oh, that's so good. Yeah.
Yeah. And you get to decide. I mean, that, and I always tell people that does not mean you are not entitled to your preferences. You can prefer anything you want.
I love that so much. That's fantastic. Yeah.
And the problem is when dealing with another human, you're probably not going to get everything you want. So what are you going to do about it?
Yeah. And again, there's those layers of desires that can be very complicated as humans. What we want, what we think we should want, what we want to make other people happy. There's a lot of those. And again, they're often in conflict.
Right.
And I think the tarot really helps us flesh out some of those internal conflicts. And, you can't change a thing until you name a thing. And I think the tarot really helps you name the thing so that you can do something different.
Yeah, definitely. I completely agree. I think one of the things that, people sometimes have the hardest time doing is just getting clear on what they're thinking about a situation or about, a relationship or a partner or whatever. And just getting those thoughts down on paper or some external medium is something that I always make people do because it just helps you like get out of the like, I'm so confused. I'm so overwhelmed. I don't know what I think. I don't know what I want. I'm not sure. Like I have so much doubt.
That's exactly it. I think I really think the tarot ultimately shows us what we know already.
Right.
I think it's very revealing.
Yeah.
But I think we can sit with what we know for decades.
Yeah. Oh, sure.
And it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking to know, and I'm speaking from personal experience here, and we can talk about that later in the show, but you need to leave a relationship and it's going to hurt everyone involved. And why would you do that? Why would you hurt everyone?
Right.
It's so difficult. But I think, again, you can spend years and years waiting for that truth, that inconvenient truth to go away. And I think the tarot can be really beautiful and calling it out and saying, is this how you want to spend the next decade? Because you can sit with this for a long time. You could die with this.
Yeah.
And,
I
think the tarot can be really beautiful and sort of like lighting a fire under you sometimes.
Nice. Yeah. I like that. It's definitely done that for me in the past. Yeah, for sure. Well, I think this is a great transition into something that I'm excited about doing today, which is Courtney's going to do a card draw for me. And so I've thought of a question that is very salient to me right now, but is also relevant to the themes we've been talking about today in terms of relationship stuff. And I'm going to, now that I know that I'm not supposed to ask a closed-ended question, I'm going to give you like my spiel and we can dilute that or distill that into a question together. Distill, not dilute. So in my business life, I have been struggling with social media for like the last 2.5 years. And to be perfectly honest, I hate it. I really have felt, frustrated by using Instagram and Facebook. I haven't gotten any like return on the investment of my time. My clients come to me from other channels. And yet every single marketing person I ever talk with tells me that I should be using these things. And so I've gone through periods of disengagement. I've gone through periods of thinking, well, maybe this is important, and maybe what I need to do is adjust my attitude and reorient myself to these platforms and how I really, like maybe it's me, in other words. And that's always, that's always a possibility. But I'm really at a point, and this, this could be like a great example of you already know what you think you know. But I'm at this point of like, well, can't I just get rid of this stuff? Do I really need to continuously like seek to find ways of engaging with something effectively that I don't really want to engage with? Or, maybe it is just that something that I haven't tweaked quite yet. Maybe it is just a mindset shift that is that I'm blind to because of my various thoughts and feelings about this conundrum.
Yeah, I see that. This is great. And so I imagine your closed-end question would be something like, should I stay on social media?
Yeah. Can I delete my Instagram account today and tell everyone who tells me that I should be using Instagram to jump in a lake?
Great.
We can use other language on this show, by the way, but I just
great. I was wondering. I've been censoring myself.
You can say whatever you want.
Yeah. Let me think about that for a second. What is a nice way to phrase this question that the cards can give some feedback on? I'm going to bend my rules right now and use the closed-ended question.
Okay.
I like it. I think it's a good one. And I think it gives the cards enough to respond to. I think they're going to be able to give us some feedback that you can go one way or the other with, whether it might be not a yes or no, but it'll respond to that. So can Marie let go of her social media presence? Okay. So I'm using my very favorite deck as the first deck I got. It's called Le Tarot des Femmes Erotiques. And it's a bunch of like vintage erotica images. And they name each one of these cards, which is why I'm giving you this background. In this deck, I pulled the Queen, it's a feminist deck also. So it's all women. So it's a Queen, which is normally the King of Swords. So like peak sword energy, peak
I love it.
energy. And the caption is, she thinks the unthinkable.
Oh my God, I'm so happy.
Card. I'm showing Marie this card now in our little video. And to me, she's in such a power pose. She's facing the camera.
Oh my God.
She's totally nude, but she has this like headscarf on. Yes, exactly. And she's got these beautiful arm bracelets. And I just feel like this woman does whatever the hell she wants.
Yeah, I think she does whatever the fuck she wants.
Exactly.
Yeah. Oh,
she thinks
so
the
happy.
unthinkable. She thinks the thing that everyone says you can't do that, and she's like, "Well, watch me."
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to watch you, Marie. Get rid of it.
Okay, great. I'm so cool. Okay, well, that was really fun. It's always awesome when something like exciting and really conclusive happens. Although, I mean, I think it's also fair to point out that like, sometimes readings are a little more subtle, right?
Definitely. Yeah.
And that's okay too.
Yep. That's right. I really think ultimately you're gathering information.
Right.
You're gathering information and you're going back to your own internal guidance system with that information and deciding what to do with it.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, if you want to stay in that situation that's not healthy for you for another decade, you get to do that.
Oh,
it
absolutely.
is your life. I'm not going to say there's a right and wrong here. I know some people might say, this is wrong. You need to like get out of it and do the thing you're here to do. It's your life and you get to do what you want with it. And we learn the things we learn when we learn them, and we're ready to make the choices we make when we're ready. And I just don't think you should pressure yourself to rush anything if you're not there yet.
Yeah, I was going to speak to that exactly. And what I always tell people about that is you basically are choosing between familiar discomfort and unfamiliar discomfort.
Oh God, I love that. That's great.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah. And what is comfortable in its familiarity, even if it's also deeply uncomfortable in the ways that you're unsatisfied or feel constrained or whatever. And the unknown, I mean, ain't no getting around the fact that stepping into unfamiliar territory is deeply uncomfortable for most of us.
Yeah. I remember I had a teacher once who said, try this trick when you're making a decision. try each decision on the yes or the no and see which one makes you feel lighter and which one makes you feel heavier.
Yeah.
And I
That's so
really
good.
love that. I think that's true with the tarot too. Even when they tell you something you don't want to hear, or again, it's like very inconvenient, there's a part of you that registers. There's a part of you that kind of resonates and maybe feels a little lighter or sort of recognizes, hey, yes, that's it. That's the thing I need. And even when you're like dreading it, and, you know, I've had people cry in readings because the information, you know, again, if you're crying, there's something being delivered that hits home. There's some part of you that's like, oh, that's it. I gotta let that in, because that's what's happening right now.
Totally. And, you know, something that I really want to emphasize, because this is why I do coaching, is because it is, you know, there have been situations in my life where I've known, like, this isn't right. This isn't what I want. Like, this isn't where I want to be at all. And that has been clear as mud. But the problem has been, like, where do I find the tools to help me get out of this and into something else?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that, you know, it ended up being that for me, coaching provided the tools to help me make changes that I'd never been able to make before in ways that resonated with me that, you know, that others hadn't. But what I want to say to people is, when you're up against a problem that feels like it's too much to deal with, you always have the choice of not dealing with it. Absolutely. And that is totally legitimate. And there is someone out there on this planet of however many billion people that can probably hold your hand and help you do the next scary thing bit by bit.
I love that so much. I think that's exactly right. And I think one of the things that keeps us stuck is this very this pragmatism.
Yes.
And that pragmatism is so born out of the reality we're in now.
Yeah.
And we're trying to get to a different reality, but our practical mind comes up with all these reasons why you're not going to get to that other reality. Yeah. And I think tools like the tarot help you see the bigger picture.
Totally.
And I think tools like coaching help you walk into that other reality. Someone holds space for there to be other options than the ones you can see.
Right. Right. Yeah. I completely agree. Yeah. Sometimes, I mean, having, you know, the sort of like cosmic landscape of the tarot laid out for you, it helps you get away from like the ant level perspective where you're just so consumed by your anthill and you can't see the fact that you're like a tiny speck in the universe.
Man, that's so right. Yeah. Yeah. That's exactly it. Which is humbling and helpful.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Courtney, this has been amazing. As you know, this show is all about expanding the conversation around infidelity. And so I want to ask you about a time when you've been unfaithful to someone, including but not limited to yourself or something. Can you tell us about a time like that?
Yeah. And it's interesting, you know, we were talking about this question earlier, and you're sort of like, you know, it doesn't have to be about like cheating. Like, unfaithful can mean a lot more than that. And I really wanted it to mean a lot more than that. But now I'm going to go with the
cheating.
cheating.
That keeps happening when I ask people this.
So I think this is such an interesting story. When I was I took a psychology class in Chinese medicine school, and it was taught by this psychologist who also happened to be a Vedic astrologer. And Vedic astrology is very different from Western astrology. It's sort of like a square chart, and she'll read your whole lifeline. And again, like, I don't believe you can divinate the future, but I know there's people who do anyways.
Right.
And so she started reading my chart for our final exam, she was like, for the final, I'll read your Vedic chart. And I was 23 or 4 at the time. I had just started dating someone, and she read some things about my early life that were very true and on point. And she said, "Oh, you're going to get married soon." I was like, "What are you talking about, lady? Like, I'm just casually dating someone. Like, I don't even know if I'm that interested." And she's like, "Oh no, you're getting married soon, and you're going to be married for a while. And then in your late 20s, you're going to cheat on this person. And you're going to cheat on them for a while also. And then you're going to end that relationship in your early 30s. And in your later 30s, you'll meet someone who's a much better fit for you, and you'll be with that person for a very long time." Now, part of the problem with readings like this, I think, is they become self-fulfilling prophecies.
Sure.
That gets into your psyche somewhere, and you're always waiting to sort of make that true, or like looking to piece it together in a way that makes sense. And also, the person that I was with at the time, I ended up being with for 7 years. I was with a woman, so we couldn't be married for a good portion of those 7
Because
years.
this was, a while ago.
Pre other things.
Yeah.
But I call it my marriage. Like, for all
Sure.
intents and purposes,
Oh, yeah.
we were married, right?
Yeah.
And about 5 years into the relationship, and we'd always planned to do this, we chose to open the relationship and start seeing other people, which I think is sort of an interesting twist on the cheating read that she got from me. Like, I was not being faithful and monogamous to her,
Right.
but we did this with a lot of intention, where it was like, I'm not getting my needs met in this relationship, and so I'm going to get certain needs met outside of the relationship. And we were open for 2 years. So, again, there's like a long period of time in which I was, quote unquote, cheating on her, not being faithful to the like monogamous relationship.
Yeah.
And also, I was not supposed to be in that relationship. It was very, very, very apparent to me. And there were many points in that 7 years when I tried to end the relationship. And actually, it was the tarot that helped me finally do it. I had a beautiful divination session with a friend who does African divination. And she was like, this relationship is done. I don't know what you're doing. Like, you're wasting your time. There's things waiting for you. And I'd heard that message before, but for some reason I came home and I pulled tarot cards, and the cards, I remember I pulled 2 cards in particular. One was the 6 of Swords, which denotes a long journey. And I read about it, and it was like, you need to leave things behind and set out on a new path. And the other was, it was one of the court cards, and it was like, some very charismatic, forceful person is going to try to stop you, which was so my ex. She was not happy about this. But there was something about it being called out that way that I finally had the courage to end this relationship and this situation where, like, I was being unfaithful to so many things in this scenario I've just described. I don't think I was being faithful to our union, even though we set this up with parameters that felt good to both of us.
Yeah.
I don't.
But it's not. If I can interject, it's not even really about, like, you agreed to open up your relationship, and that's one layer of it, but should you even be together at all?
Exactly.
Is the bigger question.
And the fact that I had such a loud voice in my head saying, you are not getting your needs met here.
Yeah.
Like, you're patching it together to try to make it work.
Yeah.
And it's funny, I was patching it together to try to make it work, to make it hurt less for everyone, right? Like, I didn't want to break her heart. I didn't want we lived together. Like, we were married again, for all intents and purposes. Like, that is very inconvenient to separate, right?
Yeah.
And it's in San Francisco, so we actually ended up living together for 1.5 years after we broke up, because
my God,
rents and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
But ultimately, she's now my best friend and engaged to a lovely partner, and I'm in a relationship with someone I really care about, and we're both so much happier. And at the time, there's no way I could have seen that. Like, when I was there, I was just like, this is just going to hurt. I'm a bad person. Like, I will cut whatever corner I need to do to make this situation work. And I think that's part of what being unfaithful is. You're cutting corners.
Yeah.
You know what the truth is, and you're saying, I'm just going to fudge this a little or hedge this a little bit. And then I'm just going to, like, keep the status quo going.
Yeah. I love that. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
You point to something that is so, I think, I just lost the word I was going to use. It's so hard for people to identify for themselves, which is, what is the difference between compromise that makes sense in a relationship and compromising your integrity?
Yep.
Compromising what's right for you.
Man,
so maybe just to make this as concrete as possible, when did you start to know, in the context of that relationship, that you weren't compromising for the sake of something that you wanted to continue, but rather you were compromising yourself?
That's a great question. And I know the answer, just popped into my head. So we were open for about 2 years. And I think it was about a year into that, I dated someone, and I was like on OkCupid, and I swear, Marie, for like 10 minutes, I'd been editing my profile, and I took off the fact that I was in an open relationship.
Oh.
And that's when this guy who I was dating found my profile. And when I realized the error, I messaged him. I was like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. This is an important detail. And he was like, you know what? Let's just meet. Let's just get together. And we had major chemistry. And he was like, I'm going to try to do this. I've never done this before. I'm going to see if I can work it. We dated for a month. he ended up saying he couldn't work with it. And it just broke my heart. And I cried every day for a month straight. And it's because I realized in that moment, I couldn't have all the things I wanted.
Yeah.
I couldn't stay in my relationship and keep the status quo and also have like a beautiful, passionate connection with someone and also feel like I was getting all my needs met, you know?
Yeah.
And what was devastating wasn't this guy, like whatever, there's other guys, but it was the fact that like, oh, something really has to change right now.
Right.
Right. And,
Right.
and in that moment, I was like, I really want that passionate experience. I
Yeah.
really want my partner to be someone I share this with. And I don't have that with my partner currently.
Yeah.
And I'm making compromises that are hurting too much.
Wow.
You know what they say, life throws pebbles and then stones and then boulders. And I think I was in like medium-sized stones when I finally made that decision.
Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting. Now since we're kind of like going in this direction already, if you don't mind me asking, what helped you get over the fear of upsetting the apple cart and the fear of hurting your partner and the fear of like blowing up your lives and all of that, which you kind of alluded to a moment ago or spoke to a moment ago?
Oh God, it was so hard. I will tell you that I got a lot of those rocks. Like I see a number of, I call them my wise women, psychics and astrologers and intuitives. And probably 3 different people called me out on this relationship being over. And I couldn't hear it for so long. But after that third one, and after I pulled those cards for myself, there was something where it was like, this is not going away. Like, I don't know what I was expecting. I don't know if I thought that sometime, somehow it would get easy.
Yeah.
But there was this realization, this will never be easy. If you want out, you just have to like face the music and like be in pain for a little while. I think I realized I was waiting for the moment when there wasn't pain involved, and that moment was never going to come.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you for putting that so succinctly. I think that's what a lot of us are doing. We're waiting for a moment where change is going to be easy.
That's it.
Where it's not going to be painful, where it's not going to be difficult, where it's not going to be disruptive.
Yeah.
And you know,
yeah.
I don't think that's
also,
the bus that's going to come.
I don't think that happens. I think also, you know, in that relationship, there were ways it wasn't working for me, and I don't want to get into specifics, but there were ways that it wasn't working for me that I was like, oh, I can live with this.
Right.
And there were a couple ways it wasn't working for me that it became apparent I didn't want to live with.
Right.
And it wasn't even a like, I can't live with this. It was like, I don't want this to be my reality.
Yeah.
I don't want that. Like, I'm really clear on that. Like, I love this person, and there's so many parts of this relationship that are great for me. And this is part of the package that I don't want that. I want something else. And that's what eventually drove me to like, okay, well then I need to make space for what I want to actually manifest in my life.
Yeah, no, I love that too. I think, you know, it's so much more powerful to leave a relationship from a place of, you know, there are many things I appreciate about this person. There are many things I've appreciated about our life together, but I prefer something different.
Yeah.
And I believe that that's available to me. I believe that it's okay for me to choose that. And, you know, I mean, in our society, I think one of my previous podcast guests said this, or maybe somebody in a novel I recently read said this, but we only think a marriage or a partnership is successful if it ends in death.
Right.
But that's the only okay way
exactly
for a romantic partnership to end. Otherwise, there's a problem.
Right.
But it doesn't have to be that way. There are so many ways of, you know, bringing a relationship to a close that can be a lot better than death.
Absolutely. I feel really strongly about that. And, you know, I'm very much a Gemini, and every time I get an astrology reader, they're like, you're going to have a lot of partners, you know that, right? And I've sort of come to terms with the fact that like, I'm going to meet people and have these experiences with them that will change me, that will change the trajectory of my life, will change my relationship with myself, will change my interests and my hobbies and my passions. And that in itself makes the relationship worthwhile and beautiful. Even if it was a 1-week affair, even if it was a rocky year of a lot of fighting. But ultimately, like, all of this is helping me hone and cultivate my relationship with myself. And I'm grateful for every single person I get to meet along the way. I don't think any of the relationships I've had are failed relationships. You know, the ones that ended, and each of us went on to learn from that experience and create other relationships based on that experience.
Yeah.
We touch each other in all kinds of ways in this lifetime,
Yeah.
romantically, platonically, professionally, and all those touches, I think, again, no matter what the outcome is, they are significant.
Right. Right. And we accept that, other types of relationships can have a different sort of valence or duration or velocity, but with romantic relationships, we have so many more notions about what the acceptable course of events looks like.
Yeah.
Or how things can begin and end, et cetera. And I think that even those of us who don't have any Gemini in our charts can take a lesson from what you just said about valuing things as they are and not, just allowing people to enrich our lives in a multitude of ways.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I think your question about compromise is such a beautiful, complex question that has no answer, but is really worth everyone just sort of meditating on. Like, in what ways is this compromise life affirming, right?
Yeah.
Is this helping my life become richer and fuller? And in what ways is this compromise really degrading who I am and the life I want and the values that I hold dear? And it's not always clear cut,
No.
Especially with compromise.
Yeah. And especially, absolutely. I completely agree that it's not always clear cut. This is something that I see so much suffering around because in our society, we have so many ideas about being an individual and also what it means to be in a couple. And so there's so many normative discourses about this stuff and about what's important to assert your individuality around and what's important to compromise around in this kind of thing. And what's a deal breaker and what's not a deal breaker and how do you deal with someone if you aren't quote unquote compatible, whatever that means. And I think that, this is how I work with it with myself and with my clients. I mean, what you ultimately have to do is question your beliefs about how things are supposed to be. And whenever the word should comes up, that's always a red flag.
Yeah.
But in addition to questioning your thoughts about what it's supposed to be like and how things ought to be and that kind of thing, the body is always a good scorekeeper, right?
Definitely.
The body is always a good barometer of if something's amiss, you're going to feel it if you let yourself tune into that.
Absolutely.
Of course, so many of us aren't in the habit of listening to our bodies
Yeah.
at all, much less in like big life question type things. So that's a whole other story.
Exactly.
Whole other conversation we could have someday.
Yeah. I also think, just to go back to your question or to this like idea of compromise, the best relationship advice I received from a couples therapist was, and I'm sure you've talked about this on this show, we all have needs for that spectrum of safety and adventure. And she was like, you're going to be at different places on that spectrum at different points in your life. And the partner you need might change if your position on that spectrum changes.
Yeah.
And I know that was true for me. In that relationship I was in, I needed a lot of safety and I got it. And it was beautiful. It was such a gift. And then I just got to this point where I needed more adventure and that person couldn't provide it for me any longer. And, you know, I think that question about compromise has different answers at different points in a lifetime, in a relationship. You know what I mean? It changed day to day, right? It's just like a constantly being updated situation. So I love everything you just said. That was great.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Courtney, it's been so awesome talking with you this way.
Yeah, this is really fun.
Where can people find you? How can they get a tarot reading with you? Give everybody the information.
Yeah. Well, you know, my service menu is going to be changing in the next
year. And this episode may not come out by the time you've made that or before you've made that change.
Oh, that's good to know.
Pretend it's 2021 already.
Okay. Well, I'm going to keep sliding scale tarot on my menu through the end of COVID. That was my initial offering. I offered it as a sliding scale option when shelter in place started. And I was like, people might be at work or just needing to try something new to get some clarity. So I will keep sliding scale tarot on my menu through the end of COVID, meaning until we have a vaccine that has like widely circulated and we feel like we can go be in the world as normal people again. So that's an option. I also do medical intuitive readings, which are I just kind of like skip the cards. Basically, I go into a meditative trance state and I look directly at your energy and your body, and I see what messages come up. And it's sort of the same idea as a tarot reading, but without the cards. We just go straight to whatever the images or messages are that's there. And if you're in San Francisco, I offer acupuncture out of my home office. So you can find all that on my website, Courtney Moore, acu.com. I'm also on Instagram. It's mission_intuition. And I think those are probably the best places to find me. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thanks again. And everybody, thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, we hope you'll go to iTunes and rate and review this podcast. Bye for now.
Thanks for listening to Your Secret is Safe with Me with Dr. Marie Murphy. Make sure to click subscribe to get updates on our latest episodes.